Folks at home, welcome back to the Crimson Oak Pond, and if you're new to this series, we built this 5-acre pond over the past year, and it took us several months to get all of the dirt excavated, and we had to bring in several truckloads of clay, and we also built an island, a dock, and got all the structure in place, and then it took a couple of months to get it full of water. After that, we stocked it with a bunch of bait fish, including bluegills and threadfin shad, and not long after that, we stocked it with these little 2-inch aggressive bass. And we're going to be giving you an update on them here in just a minute. And spring is in the air. We got the eagles soaring, baby turtles hatching, little tiny bass and bluegills covering the shallow parts of the pond, and George Jones the possum doing some mischievous things. And the spring is always the perfect time of year to restock the pond with threadfin shad. So in most of your ponds and lakes, bluegills and threadfin shad are the backbone of forage fish for bass. And although you can supplement things like crawfish, tilapia, and even prawns throughout the year, those are all seasonal and only last a short amount of time. So if you're going to grow big bass, you need healthy populations of threadfins and bluegills. And there's a couple reasons for stocking them in the spring. First, threadfin shads are really finicky, and it's hard to transport them in the summertime. But more importantly, if you stock the shad in the spring, you're doing it right before the shad spawn, which usually happens in late April or early May, and so you'll end up with thousands of more newly hatched threadfins. But there's a couple different ways to stock them. You can either pump them out of the holding tanks, but today I wanted to use the bucket method and add some to the shallow pockets of the pond so we could get some of those big bass blow-ups. And you'll notice that even a couple degrees in water temperature will temporarily stun them, and they almost look like they're playing possum, but it only lasts for a minute or so, and then they'll all swim off like nothing happened. But the fun part here is that while they're acting stunned up there on the surface, there's nothing more appetizing to a bass in this world than a struggling threadfin shad. So as you can see, the fish catch on to the incoming shad pretty quick. So I'll typically stock a couple loads of shad, one in early spring and one in late spring. And this is a perfect scenario that a lot of these may get eaten by the bass, but I'm perfectly fine with that. It's a nice easy meal for them right here around this stressful spawning time. So we'll come back through with another load of them here in about a month, and those will be key to making sure we got plenty of numbers to last them the rest of the year. But if you missed our last couple of videos, there's something very strange happening in this pond. So if you walk around the banks or shallow areas, you'll see dozens of baby 2-inch bass swimming around. And there's also some bluegills mixed in with them. And a lot of you may be thinking, well, it's springtime, you should be seeing small bass in the pond. Well, what's odd about this is typically when the water temps hit around 70 degrees, which for this pond is usually around mid-March, the bass will spawn and thousands of little baby bass fry will hatch. Well, the interesting thing is bass fry start out tiny, maybe 1/4 of an inch, and it typically takes a couple of months before they become 2 inches long. For instance, all the tiger bass that we stocked in our pond were 2 inches long in June, and they came from a hatchery where the fish had produced them that prior spring. So that's what's so puzzling. If we've got 2-inch bass in the pond right now, that means we either had an early January spawn or potentially even a late fall spawn, which is very rare, but it does sometimes happen. And some of you may wonder, why is that important? Well, if you end up having a spring spawn and a fall spawn, your largemouth bass population could get extremely crowded. So after talking to the biologist, I'm going to be watching closely to see if we have another spring spawn. And if I start seeing multiple bass spawning and little fry everywhere, then their recommendation is to take as many of those 2-inch bass out as possible to keep the pond from overcrowding. Check this out, guys. I was just walking right here along the pond's edge, and this little bitty guy was hiding up under that algae right there. I was checking to see if it was one of the Ninja Turtles we just put in Cedar Falls. I'd already looked at the bottom of their bellies. Most of them had orange bellies. But that's pretty cool. We got one of our first baby turtles right here in the pond. I think I'm gonna go put him in Cedar Falls so he can grow up with the Ninja Turtles. So the golden shiners are smart, and they've caught on to the fact that if they hang out up here by the waterfall, they don't get as much pressure from the fish. Because during the daytime, the bass probably aren't gonna swim up here. But we're gonna release this new baby turtle right here in the same area. And this little guy's probably only a few days old, which just makes it even cooler that this is the first waterfall and heavy current he's ever experienced. But there will be no lack of food if he hangs out in this area. All he has to do is open his mouth. Alright, so a couple weeks ago we put 4 baby turtles in here, and you guys named them the 4 Ninja Turtles. So now we're going to need a name for this little guy. But speaking of names, last week I asked you all to help us name the 2 bald eagles that moved into the Eagle Tower. And the new names are Sam, as in Uncle Sam, and the female is going to be named Dixie, because Alabama is the heart of Dixie. So Scott and Chris, send me your info, and I'll get your package sent out. So Sam and Dixie have been sticking to their normal routine, looking majestic as always. But Dixie will not share any fish at all with Sam. Man, no matter how hard he tries, she's not giving in. But they seem to be quite the happy pair of eagles. We still see the juveniles from time to time, but I believe they're searching for a new home now. So if you missed our last video, we had a really cool project where we installed some underwater antennas that'll be used to track all of the bass that we've installed pit tags in. So we mounted the control panel out on the dock, ran the antennas out to a couple different locations, and we had no doubt that the antenna right by the green light would get a lot of traffic. So let's check out some of this data. So for a quick update, we got people working on software to help display all of this tracking data live. And the ultimate goal is for you guys to be able to log in at any point and see where the fish are swimming at and what areas of the pond they're using. But for now, we're starting to sort the data in a database. And we got the date on the left, the fish that swam by the antenna, and the time of day that it swam by. But one really cool, interesting piece of information that Jason provided for us was the amount of pings per day. And so if you look at the number in parentheses right by the fish's name, that's how many times they were pinged. And these antennas have 1 ping per second. But by far, the most interesting fish award goes to Cypress. And you can see Cypress hung out by the oak throne antenna for 1,178 seconds. He basically made the antenna his new home. And so I'm already starting to see some really cool trends and even learning some stuff about these fish. So one of the new Florida strain bass that we just added a couple of weeks ago, named Seminole, is a very active fish and sometimes swims by the antenna almost once every hour. So this is probably a fish that hasn't settled down, making its rounds, maybe even trying to get used to when that feeder goes off. So we got some really cool projects coming up with these antennas that you'll be seeing more in the next video. And today's video is brought to you by Element. After long hot days out here at the farm, it's important to stay hydrated. And hydration doesn't just mean more fluid, it's about getting the right amount of electrolytes. And electrolytes are basically just minerals that have an electric charge when dissolved in water. And Element has formulated the perfect amount of sodium, potassium, magnesium, and 0 sugar in each pouch to keep you hydrated. And the right amount of electrolytes can help you maintain steady energy, improve cognitive function, have fewer headaches and muscle cramps, and also keep your skin hydrated. So whether you're an athlete, fasting, on a low-carb, keto, or paleo diet, Element can help you stay hydrated and at peak performance. And it's used by professional athletes, special forces, health experts, and everyday heavy sweaters. So if you're interested in checking them out, go to drinklmnt.com/BamaBass, and you can get a free Element sample pack with any order by using the link in the video description. And each sample pack includes 1 packet of 8 flavors. But the best part is they have a no questions asked refund policy. So if you don't like it, you'll get to keep the product and get your money back. So do me a favor, go check them out and stay salty, my friends. And now we're going to turn our attention to our latest pond project, the 30,000 gallon pond we call Cedar Falls. And springtime is where these aquascape ponds really start to shine. You can see the lilies, aquatic grasses, lily pads, and everything's starting to bloom around the pond. But since we built the pond, we've struggled with water clarity issues. And that's to be expected with new ponds. You got all the loose soil around. You got to do several water changes to pump that out. But the biggest hurdle I've had was the wetland filter. And we know what the problem is. And although you can't see it, there's about 6 feet of gravel stacked high in the one rectangular area of the wetland filter. Well, the problem is that the day we added the gravel, it was raining and a lot of mud and clay got mixed in with that gravel. And so far it's been a struggle to clean the bottom layer of gravel, mostly because I don't have access to it. But I came up with a new plan. So I got some high volume pumps, and we're going to flush thousands of gallons of water out of the pond, down through this gravel at a really high flow rate. And then I'm also using a pump in the clean out bay to pump all that muddy water out as it gets washed down and separates from the gravel. And the easy way to tell that this plan is working out perfect is by looking at that muddy water that's getting pumped out. So keep in mind, this is a closed loop system, so all this mud has nowhere to escape, and since it was trapped in the wetland filter, we were probably always going to have issues with water clarity. And I'd attempted to clean this out in the past, but just using well water and water hoses wasn't enough volume to wash the mud off in the bottom layers of the filter 6 feet down. So I gave it a heavy dose of rinsing today, and after flushing thousands of gallons through it, and pumping muddy water out for at least a couple of hours, I think we're finally going to achieve that crystal clear pond like ours is in the backyard. One other small problem is as I was pumping the water down, all the golden shiners got trapped here in the waterfall area, so I got to pump some more water in, raise the level up, and then scare them out of here so I can finish the clean out. But my favorite part of these clean outs is we get to get a good look at all the fish and turtles, and you can see one of the Ninja Turtles popping his head up. This is his first experience with a clean out, and he's not really sure what's going on. And there's a good look at Mike Trout and Molly Trout with our 2 second-generation bass, Johnny and June following right behind. So something very interesting you'll see with this 2nd and 3rd generation bass, if you look at their tails, it almost looks like someone took a paintbrush and painted their tails black. And initially, the smaller bass Johnny's tail was the only one that really stood out, but here over the past couple weeks, you can start seeing it in the bigger bass's tail as well. And one of you guys commented and said that's a trait of a northern bass. So I find it interesting that the newer generations of tiger bass are starting to show those northern traits. But they never miss an opportunity for an easy meal as they're chasing the shiners. Oh, and here's an up-close look at one of the bluegills we added. This one has some really nice color patterns, and I believe the ones that have the vertical stripes on them are males. Alright, got everything washed down, pumped out, and cleaned up. We're turning the water back on, pumping fresh well water in at 100 gallons per minute. We'll be cutting the waterfall on here in just a minute, but it's getting dark, so we may be doing that under the moonlight. And now that we got some clean and clear water, you can see how much easier it is to see the fish, even out here at night, because we've got a lot of underwater lights installed. There's Johnny and June back on the hunt, and one of the trout making his way up to the waterfall. And the second thing I really enjoy after the pond cleanouts is turning the waterfalls back on. As you all know, waterfalls are peaceful as it is, but it's really cool watching them start out from a trickle, turning into a stream of water, and then creating that roaring sound here in a few minutes. But there's a good shot of it starting to come over the top waterfall, where the cedar log meets the aqua blue rock. And there we go. Got all 3 waterfalls back going with some nice clean water. And now that we have the pond and farm set up, I want to start having some events out here. And there's no better event to have than Sarah's 6th birthday party. So she invited a bunch of her friends out for jump houses, hay rides, and to do a little fishing. And I've always been an avid believer of getting kids involved in fishing while they're young, because that's what happened to me, and as you all know, it's been a huge part of my life. But if you want to have some stress in your life, try taking about 15 or 20 kids fishing at the same time. So while most people would measure success in the amount of fish caught, I was just happy to say that at the end of this trip, none of the kids got hooked or fell in the pond, but they all were able to catch a fish. So even though it was stressful for me, hopefully it's good memories for them. Alright, it's that time of year. We're going to take our Secchi disc, measure the water clarity, and if it's anything over about 20 inches, that means it's probably time to fertilize. You can see we got a little bit of a green bloom out there, but we've also got some algae starting to come up there in the shallow areas. So let's see what kind of visibility we have. And it's a very simple process. You just push that down until you can no longer see it. So right about that area right in there, 23 inches, so it's time to fertilize. So we just had one of the feeders go off, and it's mostly the rainbow trout and bluegills up here feeding, and the rainbows go airborne, but if you look really close, you'll see a lot of healthy bluegills, and as I mentioned, they're one of the staples in the diet of a largemouth, so it's good to see them growing and eating those high protein pellets. But these fish are so fast, you have to slow it down to get a good look at them. There's a mixture of trout and bluegills today. Love watching those topwater shots. Nice spring day. Birds are chirping. Time for a bass feeding. We just got 1,000 golden shiners in. Got some big boys in there. So we're gonna hook our Garmin live scope up right there on the edge of the dock and see if we can get a few of them to come up for a feeding. So we're doing another one of our nightly feeding sessions. And one of the reasons we set up an antenna right here is because it's an easy way for me to get a close look at the fish and scan and identify which fish it is. Because a couple videos back, we finally had one of our pet bass, Bonnie, come up to a nightly feeding, and by having this antenna here and scanning her tag, it's just another way to confirm it was her without having to catch her or put stress on her. But the other piece of technology we're using alongside of it is a live scope, and I'm probably the first person to install a live scope on a dock. But one of my favorite things to do is study a bass, and especially their reaction to feedings. As you'll see here, some other fish start coming in as they hear the surface activity. So even though it's nighttime and I can't see, this allows me to watch those other fish get drawn in by the sounds of feeding. And that's something I've mentioned in the past. I wanted to have one audio sound, like a song or a dinner bell or something, that I would play right before every feeding so the fish would associate that sound with the meal. And this live scope is helping me watch these fish react to different sounds and learn that information even quicker. But back to the antennas, there's so much useful information we could get. For instance, if you see a pair of spawning bass in a shallow pocket, you could put an antenna right near their nesting site and be able to identify which male and female were spawning together. We also want to put antennas down in the deeper parts of the pond so we can track those fish that may not ever come up around the dock area. So a lot of cool projects coming up with that I'm really excited about. So if you guys hadn't heard yet, Nate Makes is building a squirrel house for the fox squirrel we call Foxy. So I wanted to set up some feeding stations around the farm today to monitor the squirrel activity and see the best place to install the new squirrel house. Got the eagle flying by, but let's take a look at our 3 squirrel feeding stations. Starting off first with a nut bar. They can pull up a seat right here. The nuts will go in that area. Next up, we got the original squirrel picnic table, equipped with this nice umbrella to make sure their nuts and corn don't get wet. And then more of your traditional style feeder, but we got some premium squirrel nuts as well as some corn. So now we're gonna set some up around the farm and see where the best squirrel location is. So I was getting this first squirrel house set up, looked up, and look what's hanging out right up above my head. Little bitty snake. You guys know I'm not a snake expert. Let me know if I'm wrong in the comments below. But here in just a second, I think you'll get a better understanding of why a rat snake is up in the tree. So I don't know if we're gonna see any squirrels here, but we're almost guaranteed to see a woodpecker. That guy has been working on this entire tree. Look at that. So I was looking around for areas with a lot of squirrel nests. We got one there, and one more over there. So we're gonna find a spot right in here to put one. All right, we got the nut bar installed on one of the oldest and biggest oak trees out here on the farm. Should be a perfect place for a squirrel house. But I've got some cameras set up. Let's see what comes out. So the first thing I learned about the feeding stations is they didn't factor in the weight of heavier animals when speccing out the screws. And night one, the nut bar goes down to the raccoon. But back to the rat snake being in the top of a tree. That may be where his food source is hiding out. I remember when we used to do the peanut picnic table, the little mice would jump up on there all the time. And it's no different when you put it up in a tree. Anyone with a good nose is going to find it. And speaking of good nose, George Jones must have one because he always finds a way in front of the camera. I'd already factored in seeing the raccoons on camera because most of them sleep up in a tree. But I never thought I'd see old George Jones climbing up the tree for a nut. But all of this is important because we're designing the size of the entrance to the squirrel house based on predators and other things like possums and raccoons that we want to keep out of the house. So from what I've seen so far, it's going to be a small entrance where only a squirrel or a mouse could get in it. That's not something you see every day. A possum eating under an umbrella. Alright, out here on Alcatraz Island, gonna catch a few fish, see how big they've grown. If you're new to this, we'll scan every fish we catch, see if they've been tagged with a pit tag. And if not, we'll install a new one with the pit tag injector. But now that it's springtime, we're gonna try the old lizard. Got him right off the tree, laying up on the island. Oh, he spit it out. That was pretty awesome right there. I've never fished that tree before, but I was looking at it and I was like, man, there's got to be a fish sitting there on it. That was a good one. There he is. Good one. Oh, look at that. Starting to see some bumps on the tail. That could be those parasites I was worried about with those snails, so I have to look into that. Alright, this fish has been caught. 69568. And this fish weighs 2.18 pounds. And get a quick picture of that so we can do a little research on it. And let her go. Here's another one. Oh yeah. Let's put a fight. They're hitting right here at the island. See them green specks on its head? Green all down the back. No red dots on this one. Alright, another one that's been caught. 69736. And this one weighs 1.85. I just did a flip over the Christmas tree. When we built the pond, there was a road bed right here. So there was a big circle pile of wood right there and a road bed on each side of it. And these bass are just sitting right there on that little hump. And there's a pile of them in there. I mean, these guys are letting it get right here before hitting it. I've never seen anything like that. Another tagged fish. So far they've all been tagged. 570878. This one weighs 165. I've never seen anything like this in my life. These fish are just sitting right here. I can't even see them. The moment that thing comes up out of the water. 570311. So this is something interesting. This is the first Florida strain bass we've caught, and one that was named Everglade, and you can see it dropped in weight, but I remember when we put them in, they were full of eggs. Hopefully this fish has spawned and introducing those genetics to the pond. So I don't even know why I cast out. I need to just throw right there. Whoa! I want to swap spots, but this is almost too much fun. Man, that is wild. Oh, this feels a better one. I only got one to hit further out there. Yeah, I think this one's a little better. Well, that's one we're after right there. The feeder's going off. Alright, 570502. And this one weighs 2.38. Nice one. Alright, finally got a hold of a nice female. Enjoyed that one. And this fish is named Odin, and we haven't caught Odin since last July, and it's almost doubled its weight since then. Can't believe it. I don't know why I say I can't believe it. I can believe it. That's where all the fish are, right here. 571208. And this fish weighs 187, 191. And this fish is named Dixie. So now we have a Dixie Eagle and a Dixie Bass. That's a good conclusion to today's fishing trip. Man, they are eating it good today. In case you're wondering, little white chatterbait. They bit the tail off the little paddle tail swim bait that goes behind it, but chatterbaits in the spring, tough to beat. So we're doing our spring clean out today, where we remove all that debris on the bottom of the pond that got blown in over this past fall and winter. But before I dirtied up the water, a bunch of you have been asking for an update on Moby, the most aggressive bass in the world, and not much has changed. He's still eating like crazy and has gotten big. He's put on the pounds over the winter, as well as the black crappie that we call Outlaw. You can see he's put down a few shiners in his day as well. But check out our latest resident of what we call Clyde's Cove. One of the original Ninja Turtles went in there, but was challenged by one of the others. Even though they're brothers, it doesn't look like they want to share living space. And it's been a little while since we updated you on the 300-gallon aquarium with our pet bass we called Tiger, because he was the first tiger bass we caught out of the Crimson Oak Pond. So it's time to do a little feeding. Alright folks, that is going to wrap up today's video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, because this time of year we have so much going on with all the ponds and updates on the fish. You don't want to miss out on it. But I hope y'all enjoyed this one, and we will see you all next time.